Hello guys, Fish767 here. So today I have a deck I'd like to show you. It's Rakdos Sacrifice, mostly because the commander doesn't matter, so you could use any commander. I picked Judith because she is basically an extra Wincon for the deck. She's pretty cheap as far as commanders go, only 70 cents. So I figured that she would be the best option because the deck doesn't need anything really from a commander other than the Wincon part. So she was perfect for the job, so that's who I picked. But before I get into any of the specifics of the deck, I do want to just let you know this deck is expensive. It's like $140, maybe more than that. And that's just now. The cards have been spiking. The cards that I put in this deck have been spiking recently. Just a couple months ago, some of the cards in the deck weren't even above $1, and now they're up to $5. Machias jumped up there twice now. So this deck is getting expensive. So I don't want this to be a deck that you take and build an exact replica of. I want you to take some of the combos in here and find ways to use them in other decks, and hopefully I inspire you to build your own deck that's good. So that's why I'm showing you this deck. It's a really expensive deck, and I would not recommend building it unless you want to actually play with it and keep it together for a long period of time. I just so happen to own all the cards already, so I figured I'd build this deck. As far as upgrades go, the only ways to really make it any better is by increasing the price drastically, using better mana rocks such as Grim Monolith, Basalt Monolith, the expensive ones like Mana Crypt, Mutavault. Those are really the only ways to upgrade the deck as far as that goes. So I'm just going to go ahead and get into it. So Soul Ring, Worn Power Stone, these are our ramp cards. We have Soul Ring, Worn Power Stone, Firemind Vessel, Hedron Archive, Urgolem's Eye, Thran Dynamo, and Dreamstone Hedron. All of these are mana rocks that tap for 2 or more mana, which is very important as far as things. I need to move this, don't I? But they all tap for 2 or more mana, which is important because we need mana rocks that tap for 2 or more mana as combo pieces. And so Basalt Monolith, Grim Monolith, Mana Crypt, and I think it's Mana Vault, I'm not sure. Those ones all tap for more mana, but they're expensive. And then we have Blink Moth Urn, which is going to give us mana equal to the number of artifacts that we control if it's untapped during our pre-combat main phase. It does the same for all of our opponents as well, but we're pretty much an artifact-based deck. We run about 20, so it's pretty good for us. I didn't really put the rest of them in any order. Oh yeah, we got Solemn Simulacrum. He does everything that we want the deck to do. He ramps as a 4-drop, he's a creature. When he dies, he draws us a card, and he's an artifact. So he does everything that we need the deck to do. The rest of the deck isn't really in any specific order. We have Dimir House Guard, Mastermind's Acquisition, Shred Memory, Brain Spoil, Diabolic Tutor. Those are our tutors. I think that there's 2 more. There's Rezakith's, right? And Final Parting, which I'm trying to find real quick. But basically, the Shred Memory, Brain Spoil, and Dimir House Guard, they have transmutes, so you pay 1 black, discard them, go search for a card with the same converted mana cost as the cards. So that would be 2 for Shred Memory, 5 for Brain Spoil, and 4 for Dimir House Guard. And Dimir House Guard is also a sacrifice outlet should we end up needing one of those. And for what we're going to get with Shred Memory is probably a win condition, maybe Genesis Chamber, because those are cards that we need to go off. Brain Spoil goes and gets Mer Turbine if we need it as part of a combo, but that's like a fringe combo. You probably won't use it. It was an accident that it ended up being in the deck, but that's okay. And Dimir House Guard goes and gets us Pitiless Plunderer. Any of these other, like, we can grab a search spell if we need to. Any other card that we really need, but that's our search cards. And oh yeah, with where was it? It was Final Parting. You can go get 2, so I recommend getting Reassembling Skeleton if it's not already in the graveyard, and sticking it in the graveyard because it's a good value engine for the deck. Then for draw, we have Read the Bones, Painful Lessons, Succumb to Temptation, Live Fast, Night's Whisper. Those all let us draw cards at the cost of life. Liliana Dreadhorde General lets us draw cards whenever a creature we control dies. There are better cards than Liliana because she's so expensive, but she does do stuff that we need because her +1 makes us a token, her -4 makes each opponent sack creatures, each player, but we mainly worry about our opponent sacrificing creatures, and her -9 basically wins you the game. But if you can run some other cards that you can... There are better cards, like Dark Prophecy may be better cost-wise, but it's not as good for the deck for what we want, because we can't remove it once it's in play because it's an enchantment. And once it's in play, it's going to make us lose life every time that a creature dies, and if we don't have some way to counteract that, then we're going to lose the game, which is why I didn't put it in. But if you can find cards, like there's a 3 mana, I think it's a 2/3, and it says whenever a creature you control dies, a non-token creature, I believe, you lose a life, draw a card. Midnight Reaper, maybe? I'm not 100% sure. If you can find a creature version that says you draw cards and stuff, you can put that in, and that'll be fine, because we're able to remove it if we need to. It's basically getting us to the combo, but we don't want it on the field when we go off. Liliana has loyalty, so we can deal it damage to win the game using either Judith or some other form, which is why it's in the deck. Then we have some sacrifice draw effects. Village Rites, Merciless Resolve, Blood Divination, Costly Plunder, and Altar's Reap. Those let us draw cards by sacrificing permanents. Most of the time that'll be creatures. And I think that's it for draw. We do have Shadows of the Past, which says whenever a creature dies, we get to scry one. And we have Quicksmith Genius. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under our control, we may discard a card if you do draw a card. And then there's Yawgmoth, which says pay 1 life, sack a creature, put a -1/-1 counter up to 1 target creature, and draw a card. So that's our draw. Yawgmoth is part of the combo, so I put him to the side. For removal, we have Mutual Destruction. It has flash as long as you control a permanent with flash. That's probably not going to happen. As an additional cost to cast it, we sack a creature to destroy target creature. Epic Downfall, exile a creature with convert mana cost 3 or greater. Doomblade, destroy target non-black creature. Terror, destroy target non-artifact non-black creature. It can't be regenerated. Most of these are instant speed, not all of them though. And Terminate, destroy target creature. It can't be regenerated. I went for 2 CMC or less on these removal spells, because we need to slot them in on the turns that we're trying to set up our combos. And so they do have limitations, but it's not a set in stone thing. You could run 3 CMC if you need to. Just whatever you have. But these cards actually aren't very expensive, so I just run those. The rest of the deck pretty much is combos. So I'm going to go through and pull out our Wincons first, and that way we can just look at these and, oh yeah, hold on. Welding Jar basically regenerates an artifact. We can sack it to regenerate an artifact, which is good for protection. Elixir of Immortality, pay 2, tap it, gain 5 life, shuffle it in your graveyard into their owner's library in case we end up with everything in the graveyard, which shouldn't happen, but if it does, it's not good. So we're trying to prevent that. Oh yeah, and Trading Post. So Trading Post is a really nice card. We can pay 1, tap it, discard a card, gain 4 life, pay 1, tap it, pay a life, put a 0/1 white goat onto the battlefield, pay 1, tap it, sack a creature, return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand, or pay 1, tap it, sack an artifact, draw a card. It's good removal, or not removal, it's good card advantage, especially with everything else that we run. Okay, so these are our Wincons, pretty much. We have our commander, Judith. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, deals 1 damage to any target. Impact Tremors. Whenever a creature ETBs, it deals a damage to each opponent. Reckless Fireweaver does the same thing, but with artifacts. Outpost Siege, set on dragons, which is what we're always going to choose. Whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, deals 1 damage to target creature or player. Blood Artist and Zulaport Cutthroat do almost the same thing. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses a life, and you gain a life for the Cutthroat. And for Blood Artist, it works on any creature. It doesn't have to be yours, but you only get to make 1 player lose a life, and you'll gain a life. Altar of the Brood. Whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under control, each opponent mills a card. So this one's kind of iffy. You could take it out, but it's nice in case you can't do anything else. Mayhem Devil, whenever a player sacrifices a permanent, it deals 1 damage to any target, and then Disciple of the Vault. Whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from play, you may have target opponent lose 1 life. So those are our Wincons. We're going to be trying to trigger them as many times as possible, pretty much, and that's what the deck runs around, so I'm not going to include them in the combos. We're just going to try to reach infinite. So our first, probably, I'll start with the easy combos. So we have Triskelion and Mikaeus, and the same thing works with Workhorse as well. But with Workhorse, you have to have some way to sacrifice it, and then using Cauldron of Souls with Genesis Chamber and Clock of Omens or Draw Scorpion, you can do some fun stuff. So I'm going to focus on these cards for a moment. Mikaeus and Triskelion goes infinite by itself. So Mikaeus says, other non-human creatures you control get +1/+1 and have Undying, which means when they die, if it had no +1/+1 counters on it, you return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. So Triskelion is a 6/6/1/1, or it's not 6/6/1/1. It's a 6-cost 1/1. When it enters the battlefield with 3+1/+1 counters on it. Remove a +1/+1 counter from it to deal 1 damage to target creature or player. And so what you're going to do with Triskelion is it's going to come down as a 6/6 if Mikaeus is on the field. And you're going to have to remove 2 +1/+1 counters from it to deal itself. Oh wait, I had that wrong. No, I have that right. So you'll remove 2 +1/+1 counters to deal it 2 damage, and then you're going to remove the other one to deal a damage to an opponent, and then it'll die and come back, but this time, instead of having 3, it'll have 4 +1/+1 counters on it. So you'll be able to deal 2 damage now, and then deal 2 damage to it, and it'll die, and you can do that an infinite number of times, because it won't have any +1/+1 counters on it when it dies. And so that deals infinite damage, and our other cards would just speed up the process. So the other way to do this is with a card like Workhorse instead of Triskelion, and so Workhorse says it comes into play with 4 +1/+1 counters on it. You can remove a +1/+1 counter from it to add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool, play this ability as a mana source, and it's a 0/0. So you remove the 4 +1/+1 counters to make 4 mana, then you have to sacrifice it somehow, so that could be Yawgmoth or Ashnod's Altar, or whatever the other card was that lets us sacrifice, Dimir Houseguard. So then you sacrifice it, and it'll come back with 5 this time, and then you're going to remove those 5 to get colorless mana, and then sacrifice it again. So this gives you infinite colorless mana, and it will die, which will trigger the rest of our cards. They're both artifacts, so they work like that. Pentavus does a similar thing. It enters the battlefield with 5 +1/+1 counters on it. You can pay 1 to remove a +1/+1 counter from it to put a 1/1 colorless Pentavite onto the battlefield, or pay 1 to sacrifice a Pentavite and put a +1/+1 counter on Pentavus. You have to have 1 colorless mana. Oh, I just noticed you can't see these bottom cards. Just Yawgmoth and Ashnod's Altar. So you have to start with a colorless mana in order to be able to make this work. But what you're going to do is you're going to pay 1 colorless mana to remove a +1/+1 counter, make a Pentavite, sacrifice the Pentavite to Ashnod's Altar. Yawgmoth doesn't work on this one. But you're going to sacrifice the Pentavite to Ashnod's Altar, which is going to give you 2 mana. Then you're going to use that 2 mana to remove 2 +1/+1 counters to make 2 Pentavites, sacrifice those, and then you're going to remove more +1/+1 counters from Pentavus until it has no +1/+1 counters on it. Then you're going to sacrifice it for mana. And then you get to do that to make infinite tokens, and then you could make Pentavus infinitely big at the end of it if you wanted to. And it gives you infinite mana and infinite death triggers, infinite artifact ETBs, all the fun stuff. So, Yawgmoth plus Mikaeus, so that's it for Mikaeus, pretty much, besides this Yawgmoth part. So Yawgmoth plus Mikaeus, if you have 2 other creatures, it goes infinite, as long as they're non-human. So, because they have Undying, and Mikaeus can put -1/-1 counters on them, you'll have 1 that'll have a +1/+1 counter on it from it having Undying, okay? And then, or I should really just start. So let's say that you have these 2. This is what you have on the field. You have Yawgmoth, Mikaeus, Mayhem Devil, Disciple of the Vault. So you're going to use Yawgmoth to sacrifice the Disciple of the Vault, and that's going to let you put a -1/-1 counter on Mayhem Devil. Disciple of the Vault is a human, so that's not going to work, but you'll basically, let's go with this vampire, it's the same idea. So you'll sacrifice the Blood Artist to Yawgmoth, put a -1/-1 counter on Mayhem Devil. Blood Artist will have Undying, so it'll come back with a +1/+1 counter on it. Then you'll sacrifice the Mayhem Devil to put a -1/-1 counter on the Blood Artist, canceling out the +1/+1 counter. Mayhem Devil will come back because of Undying. Then you'll sacrifice the Blood Artist to put a -1/-1 counter on the Mayhem Devil, which will cancel out that +1/+1 counter, and then Blood Artist will come back because of Undying. And then you can loop that. You just have to be careful because you lose a life from Yawgmoth every time that you do that, so do be warned. I think that's it for Mikaeus. There could be another one, but I'm not 100% sure. So, Yawgmoth can do a lot of the same things that Mikaeus can, but it's not really the same. So I'm not going to do much more with Yawgmoth. I think that you get the idea with Yawgmoth and Mikaeus. But we can still do more with Pentavus, Workhorse, and Triskelion if we use Clock of Omens and Cauldron of Souls. And a substitute for Clock of Omens in this case would be Drow Scorpion. In most other cases it won't work, but Clock of Omens says tap 2 untapped artifacts, you control the untapped target artifact, and Drow Scorpion says whenever it or another artifact creature is put to a graveyard from play, you may untap target artifact. And since all these creatures are artifacts, Drow Scorpion will trigger on every single one, but in order for Clock of Omens to work, you're going to need Genesis Chamber most of the time. For Pentavus, you don't need Genesis Chamber, but for all the other ones you will. And you're going to need someone to sacrifice them. Ashnod's Altar is the only way to get this to work. I'm pretty sure Yawgmoth might work for the Workhorse, but you're going to need Ashnod's Altar for the rest. So what you're going to do is Cauldron of Souls says tap, choose any number of target creatures. Each of those creatures gains persist until end of turn. And persist is the opposite of undying, pretty much. So what persist says is if it would die and it had no -1/-1 counters on it when it died, it comes back into play with a -1/-1 counter on it. So all these cards come into play with +1/+1 counters on them, which automatically cancels out the -1/-1 counter. The only issue is we have to tap the Cauldron of Souls in order to do it, so we have to untap it somehow. So this is why we have Genesis Chamber. It says whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield, if it is untapped, that creature's controller creates a 1/1 colorless Myr artifact creature token. So when all these come back because of the persist, we will make a Myr. And then we can use Clock of Omens to tap that Myr and the creature that just came back to untap your Cauldron of Souls. And then that lets you do it an infinite number of times. We just have to sacrifice them with Ashnod's Altar, or let them kill themselves because Workhorse and Triskelion will kill themselves. Pentavis is really the only one that you need Ashnod's Altar for because you have to activate its abilities. The other two will kill themselves automatically, so you don't have to worry about it. And Drow Scorpion, since they're all artifacts, will trigger anyway. So I think that that's good enough for this combo. There is another way to set it up if you don't have Genesis Chamber, and that's Battered Golem. It doesn't. So Battered Golem is a 3-drop 3/2 Golem. It says it doesn't untap during your untap step. Whenever an artifact comes into play, you may untap Battered Golem. So since all these creatures are artifacts, they'll come into play and untap the Golem, and then you can tap them with the Clock of Omens to untap the Cauldron of Souls. And that's just another way to set that up. So since we're on the topic of Battered Golem, I'll move on to our next combo. We're going to need that again later. Is Myr Turbine. So Myr Turbine works accidentally, pretty much. So you tap Myr Turbine, put a 1/1 colorless Myr artifact creature token into play, or you can tap it and tap 5, untap Myr. You control and search your library for a Myr and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. I don't think that we run very many or any Myr. But what you're going to do is you're going to tap the Turbine, and then that's going to make you an artifact, and we don't actually need Drow Scorpion. So you're going to tap the Turbine, and that's going to make you a Myr. And then you're going to tap the Myr and the Golem, and untap the Turbine. And then you're going to tap the Turbine again, and make another Myr, which is going to untap the Golem, and then you're going to tap those, and you get infinite Myr. So if you have some way to sacrifice them, then you win the game. So you have to get that far, but this is just one way to do it. Clock of Omens is really good for this deck. So our other combo, I'm just going through them real quick, is Cauldron, Familiar, Witch's Oven. So you have to have a way to untap the Witch's Oven if you're going to do this one. So we're going to use Genesis Chamber again. And this is the only way that this one works, I think. No, because Pitiless Plunderer works instead of Genesis Chamber. In most scenarios, they can be switched out, because Pitiless Plunderer says whenever another creature you control dies, you make a treasure artifact token with tap, sack this artifact, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. And so since it's an artifact, it works for the Clock of Omens. So they are pretty much interchangeable for any of these combos. So what you're going to do for this combo is Drow Scorpion won't work, I don't think. So you're going to tap the Witch's Oven, and so Witch's Oven says tap, sack a creature, create a food token. If the sacrificed creature's toughness was 4 or greater, create 2 food tokens instead. Those are artifacts, by the way, so they're pretty fun. Cauldron Familiar says when it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses a life and you gain 1 life, and you can sacrifice a food and return Cauldron Familiar from your graveyard to the battlefield. And so we're going to use Genesis Chamber or Pitiless Plunderer to make tokens whenever the familiar either enters the battlefield or dies, and then we're going to use those tokens with the food that's made, and that gives us 2 artifacts, and then we're going to use Clock of Omens to untap the oven. Then you need some way to sacrifice them, which can either be an Ashnod's Altar or a Yawgmoth, and that's going to win you the game. So there's one way to do it. Then the other thing that we're going to need is Pitiless Plunderer and Ashnod's Altar and Reassembling Skeleton. So Reassembling Skeleton says pay 1 and a black, return it from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. And so what we're going to do here is sacrifice the skeleton to make 2 colorless mana, which is going to make a treasure because of the Plunderer. Use the treasure to get black mana, and we can bring it back. And it'll be tapped when we bring it back, but then we just sacrifice it again, and we have infinite death triggers here. And that's also going to produce infinite colorless mana. The last card that I have is a Bolas' Citadel. This is not a combo card, it's just a good card to have in the deck. So I think I may have actually missed some combos, because there's lots of ways to make these cards somehow produce a combo. But that's generally how the deck works, and I think I touched almost all the combos. And like I said, most of these cards will end up winning you the game. The only one that you have to be worried about is our commander, because it doesn't trigger all the time. So everything here involves artifacts in some way, shape, or form, and we'll end up putting them in the graveyard at some point. And so because of that, I think all the cards will work. Disciple of the Vault and Judith are the only ones that might not work. And this is because Judith only works on non-token creatures, so as the ones that make tokens and we rely on using the tokens as our death triggers, they won't trigger Judith. And Disciple of the Vault only works when an artifact is put into a graveyard from play, so for the Cauldron familiar combo, unless you can sacrifice all those tokens that you just made, it's not going to work. So there are certain combos that don't always work, but most of them will. So our lands, we run 37. We have Inventor's Fair, Detection Tower, Myriad Landscape. Myriad Landscape is a good ramp. Detection Tower lets us hit opponents with hexproof. Not Shroud, though, so if they have Shroud, we're out of luck. And Inventor's Fair basically gains us a life if we have 3 or more artifacts at our upkeep, but the important part is we can pay for, tap it, sack it, and search our library for an artifact card, reveal it, put it into our hand, and then shuffle our library. And we can only do that if we have 3 or more artifacts. We run 19 swamps and 15 mountains as our lands here. You could run this as a mono red deck or a mono black deck if you wanted to, but then you lose some of the consistency of it. I think that you probably noticed our only red cards are these, our commander, and then there's one other red card that we have in the deck, and that is the guy that lets us draw a card every time that, oh, we have that one too. But that's it. That's all the red that's in the deck, including our commander. So you can build this mono black, but if you do, you lose 1, 2, 3, 4 Wincons, so you'd have to somehow replace those. There are other Wincons in black that you can use. And you'll also lose a nice piece of removal. Terminate's a really good piece of removal, actually. And our commander will no longer help us with the deck's general goal, but you could use Sir Conrad, and then that doesn't even matter anymore, because Sir Conrad will trigger the same as Judith. Actually, Sir Conrad will trigger better than Judith in most cases, since it hits every single opponent, and it hits all their stuff as well. So Sir Conrad is a better commander, and he's still 3 Seamacy, I think. So if you wanted to, you could switch them out, and there are definitely ways to make this a mono black deck, and that would give you more options, because then you could run Cabal Stronghold and Cabal Coffers, and then you end up in the black doubling area of mana, and that would be nice. But this is how I chose to build it, because I wanted to build Rakdos for a while, and this is definitely a fun deck to pilot. There's tons of different ways to set up the combos, and you can come out of nowhere and win the game pretty easily. As you saw, a lot of the combos, you don't see them coming until it's too late, because they go infinite once one of the last piece hits the battlefield, and there's so many interlocking combos that it makes it hard to stop them all. So I just wanted to show you guys this deck. Like I said, it's pretty expensive as far as my decks go. Normally it's $150, but you can drop that price by taking out the Liliana and putting in one of the other cards. You could probably drop it by $6 to $8 just there. And then if you wanted to, you can move around some of the other pieces. But a lot of the cards have been going up in price, and I didn't even know it, but Pitiless Plunder is now like $4.50. And it used to only be $1, if that. It was not expensive not too long ago, and now it's getting up there. So something's happening probably with, I'm imagining, Historic, or it's not Historic, it's Pioneer. That's probably what's causing such a rise in these cards' prices. So I'm interested to hear what you guys think, if you can think of any other combos in here. A lot of the ones that I showed were, you can use them just with colorless. You don't even need colored cards in the combos. So you could put this in like a blue or a white deck or something like that, or a green deck even, if you wanted to work it out. And I know that it could work because there's cards like Death's Presence that'll, whenever a creature dies, you put counters equal to its power or whatever onto another creature. There's stuff like that that'll definitely make this possible in other colors besides this. So it's the black, though, that makes this deck so expensive, and that's probably because like 2/4, about a half the deck is black, 2/4 is a half. So, but there's ways that you can improve this or switch out some of the cards. I just don't know exactly how good it would be to do that. But I worked on this for only a couple hours today, actually. Made a couple changes. There's a few cards that you could take out and put in to switch things around, but most of them are actually necessary for the deck to function at its full capacity. So mill really hurts us. If they mill the wrong combo pieces, we're out of luck. But it was fun to play the couple games that I did play. The games did go long, though, because I'm using X-Mage, and X-Mage doesn't like that stuff. But I'm really interested if you guys end up making any decks like this. I'd love to see them in the comments below. Just give me a list or something, because I'm interested to see how what the other ways are to build this deck in different colors and stuff like that, or if there's maybe even a better way to build it that's cheaper that I didn't see. Because I don't like building decks that are this expensive. Normally, my decks will be $100 or less, and that's where I like them to be. Once I get above $110 or something, once I get up in that area, I'm like, this is making me uncomfortable to have this much money in a deck. So I really try to keep these decks low budget, but this one's a nicer, higher budget deck that is of a pretty high power level, I'd say. It's not insanely, it's not competitive, that's for sure, but it's nice and up there. It's probably maybe a 7. I don't know that it would be up at an 8 level, but it's probably a 7. So we don't run any enchantment removal because we're in black and red, which really sucks because mono white or white blue blink, like if you get against a blink deck and they can blink their enchantments right, you're going to be living in a very bad area, because all that they have to do is take out your one combo piece and it's game over. If they hit Clock of Omens, Machias, and Reassembling Skeleton, you're basically out of options. I think that you lose at that point, unless you can somehow manage to pull one off, but I'm pretty sure that you're done for at that point, because that takes out the majority of our combos. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you thought. If you really like the video, please consider subscribing and leaving a like and a comment. That really helps the video get out to more people. And I'd love to have you guys around. And let me know if you guys want to see any particular deck, actually, in the comments, because I've been collecting cards recently, and I have some decks that I want to play with, especially around 9 lives, because there's cards like, I think it's Power Conduit, that lets you manipulate counters really easily. And so there's a 9 lives Lich's Mastery deck that I want to build, but I don't quite have everything for it to be competitive enough to be, I think, viable in my playgroup. I'm missing Solemnity and Glacial Chasm. If I were to get those, the deck would be pretty much good to go. So, but thank you guys for watching. I'll see you all next time.